Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sweet Combat Season 1, Episode 34. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, so first and foremost, we are picking up where last episode left off. It turns out that Tien was having a seizure. People who've had, brain trauma, it seems like 30% of the time, 30% of people would have, a seizure situation. So the doctor ultimately tells you that now that Tien's outside of that observational period, if he doesn't wake up in the next few days, it's like you need to mentally prepare yourself for the chance he might not ever wake up. And that's a harsh reality. And especially when, her brother and her grandfather get brought up in the conversation, because they are suggesting that you put him in a convalescent type of home or hospital and then sending siblings off to boarding school, which is interesting because I don't know if that's supposed to be a wink and nod towards the webtoon or whether that still potentially could be still a potentiality, because near the end of this series, because Tien's siblings are actually really smart, they actually get accepted into a really prestigious school that I think Tien wouldn't have to pay for. Basically, be like a scholarship thing. But basically, it's kind of it is kind of like a boarding school that they go to, and that's pretty much where they are for the last bits of the series. So I don't know if that's supposed to be a wink and nod to that, or that still could be a possibility even at the end of this live action. But since they brought up a boarding school thing, I thought was interesting. But it's pretty late in the series. Like I said, it's probably in the last dozen or so chapters, maybe a little bit more, that they introduced that concept of the siblings are going off to a boarding school, so of sorts. So that was just kind of interesting. But it's also because both it's not just her grandfather suggested it, but also her brother said right, that's the right thing to do, because it's this way you can't just be holding out hope for Tien's going to get better. You got to do what's best for Tien and his siblings, and obviously they'll pay for it and stuff, but it is that complicated thing of it is a lot to kind of put that on you to have that, she has to kind of make that decision, but it's also because she doesn't want to let go of Tien. She doesn't want to just let go of hope that he might wake up, but it's also the thing of, because no one else can really make that decision for him. His dad's going, his mom's in the wind. We have no idea where she is, so she can't make that decision for him. And also his siblings are way too young, so it kind of falls on you to make this kind of decision. And so when she comes back to the hospital, she's pleading with him, and it's the most heartbreaking scene, her tearing up, begging him to wake up. It's you brought warmth into my life, and now it's that's going to disappear. And she's at least knowing he was out and about, even if they can't be together, can't even be in Korea together, even if she has to be abroad, at the very least knowing he's out there in the world. She's if you're not here in the world, then what's you just what is where's the meaning in life then? Because it's you brought so much to my life. Even saying I will make 100, no, even 1,000 more bracelets if it means you wake up. She even says I will find a way to move past Uncle G's death and learn to forgive the death strike if it just means you'll wake up. And just her tears pouring out. She's what else do you want me to say? I would say anything. And you're just oh, it's just like I said, it's so few times you see her break down. Like I said, even using the webtoon, it's I can only clearly think of one time, and it was like I said, it was the Moon Young situation. Very much like in a couple episodes back when she was at Yanan's place and broke down. Like I said, that's a scene kind of basically from the webtoon under slightly different circumstances, but it is a situation of that is one of the few times, I think that's in fact the only time you ever see Queen break down like that in a webtoon. And obviously it's still only a handful of times you've seen her actually break down like that. This is the second time including that situation. She's cried before, but to break down like that, understandably, it's just a tough situation all around. And so it's kind of please wake up, because it's because for her, it's at the very least, she's if basically my grandfather's kind of suggesting putting you in this convalescent home and also putting your siblings in a boarding school and doing what's best for both of you, for all three of you, but also it would mean I'd go along with the plans of me still going abroad. But the problem is I just wouldn't be able to do it, and it'd be everything else in life is supposed to go on like it's supposed to, but you just won't be there. And it's I can't imagine my future without you. At least knowing you're somewhere out there in the world, knowing you're in this situation, is just too much sadness. So in the kind of dreamlike state he's in, Tien hears, Queen calling out to him over and over, and he wakes up, and it's just this beautiful moment, her just waking up too, being like, oh my god, you're up. And it's like, is this a dream? He's like, it shouldn't be. And she's like about ready to go, like, let me get the doctor. He's like, no, just please don't leave. He's like, it feels like forever since I saw you. I miss you. And she's like, it does kind of feel like it's been forever. And just for them to have that moment, like, together, before we even get the doctors involved, before anyone else finds out, just to have that moment together, I think for Tien, it's almost like, right, like, it's just like, it's not exactly the same, but I'm sure there's a parallel to like how when she was drinking, she's like, yeah, all your problems, like whatever's troubling kind of goes away. And I think for a moment, it's just like, right, I have you by my side again. It's like, let's enjoy this moment. I'm okay. You're here. Everything's going to be okay. Like, let's just enjoy this moment before reality sets in again. So, because everyone's kind of dealing with the whole thing of, what if Tien doesn't wake up? Obviously, like, that notion got brought up because his siblings haven't been able to go see him for a bit, and his sister's like bawling her eyes out, and Yana trying to calm her down, and then like Yana makes the mistake of talking to her dad, and her dad's like, oh, like, it's like, oh, what if we go to the hospital and they find out, like, oh yeah, like Tien really is kind of, and then both of them start breaking down, and she's like, cool, I had to deal with one of them crying, now I got to deal with both. So he ends up going off to calm them down with ice cream. And for Yanan, it's just a reminder of, I definitely need a woman around here to potentially like balance out my dad. Probably, I think the argument could be like, kind of balance me out too, because we have no idea what the hell we're doing when they're looking after these kids. Probably Mama Hao would have definitely handled that situation better. We've seen time and time again, Yanan's dad has a tendency to put his foot in his mouth. Yanan can too, but I don't think to the same extent her father does. Which, speaking of Mama Hao and Yanan's dad, obviously, I love that Hao is still keeping that a secret from Zhao Mi. She's like, let's go see Tien. He's like, yeah, I've got to go prior engagement. She's like, what are you up to? And the person he was meeting up with was Yanan. And I love the whole fact is, I actually had to rewind it because partway through their conversation, I looked up and I was like, oh, there's Zhao Mi in the background. They don't make a point of it. Like, I actually had to rewind. If you look like partway into their conversation, you'll just see her casually stroll from the left side of the screen, and then she'll stop, and she's just out of focus in the background the entire time. It's like they don't make notice of it. I think it's such a subtle thing that I was like, I just happened to look. I was focusing on them and the subtitles, and I happened to look up, and I was like, oh, she's already standing here. I was like, that's creepy because it seemed like she popped up out of nowhere. So that's why I had to rewind to see when she exactly walks on the frame. Like I said, she's standing back there at least like a good 20 seconds during their conversation, when she walks up. So I think that's so interesting. But she's like, what are they up to? It's kind of about Hao going behind her back, but it's also about Hao and Yanan, because she doesn't like being kept out of the loop. It's like, what are they meeting about? So that kind of bothered her. So later, because basically they're having a conversation about, right, like, what do we do about this? Like, how do you feel about it? And initially, Hao was like, I wasn't sure how to feel about the situation. It kind of shocked me, but I think in the end of the day, it might be a good thing for both of our parents, And later on, Yanan, because Yanan and, we never actually got to see how Yanan handled it, but we definitely saw how Hao tried to handle it with his mom, giving his mom a massage, and it's like, so Mom, like, basically, have you ever thought about the future? And she's like, no, like, what's there to kind of really think about? I take every day, like, a day at a time. He's like, what if, like, aren't you lonely? She's like, why would I be lonely? Like, I have you, and most likely when you get married and have a kid, I'm going to be taking care of that kid too. So I'm like, when am I going to have time to be lonely? And he's like, but Mom, who's to say I'm going to live with you? Who's to say even my wife was like you enough to live with you? And I love that she got so pissed. She shook his hands off and was like, what's that supposed to mean? Does that mean you're not going to live with me? You're too good to live with me anymore? You're just going to throw me to the ants and the rats? Like, that's what you're going to do? After everything I've done? Like, she was so pissed, and she kept hitting him. I was like, poor Hao. He's like, no, Mom, you're getting it wrong. You're not understanding. She's like, what did you mean, huh? And kept hitting him. I was like, poor Hao. So it's like, that didn't work out. So there ends up the conversation of How at the end of the day, it's like he's like, I put out feelers and it turns out my mom's never really given any notion or thought about wanting to be with anybody. So it's like, maybe that's kind of perfectly fine. And at the end of the day, Yanan's like, well, how do you feel about it? And it's like, well, why does my opinion matter? It's like, well, you're her only son. Whoever dates your mom has to get your approval, so it should matter, right? And Yanan herself is kind of like, right, she thinks it'd be good for her dad, but also it's kind of like, at the end of the day, even if it's just my opinion alone, at the end of the day, the one that is also very important is how Hal feels about it. So they're kind of trying to figure that out. And then Xiaomi's like, okay, who are you guys talking about? Now it's a conversation of shifts over to Tien, of course, of, right, I think we need to look after his siblings, because I don't think, it doesn't seem like they knew about the conversation you had with her brother and her grandfather about how to handle the sibling situation. And it's like, right, we should probably take turns like looking after them. But it's like, no, most likely, like Yanan is like, no, like you wouldn't be able to do that. You can barely take care of yourself, Xiaomi. At the end of the day, it'd most likely be like me and Hao taking care of the kids. I mean, if anything, obviously understandable why she would like want to. I mean, she is the cook and everything, but it's like we would probably end up taking the most responsibility. I mean, it makes sense because they are the ones that have had experience like kind of living with them, even for short periods of time. They've kind of been like, because it's that, being an uncle or an aunt type of situation where it's like you're not a parent. You get to have the fun. You get to play cool uncle and aunt, but, then you don't have to deal with the responsibility of the kid 24/7. And you're able to, I get to be here for the fun times and push all the responsibility on the parent. It's kind of like that with Xiaomi. Like, she has the fun of hanging out with the kids and cooking for them, but not having to fully deal with the responsibility. I mean, even Yanan and Hao still have, like, their dad and mom, respectively, like, helping out a lot with that. But they're kind of alluding to the fact is like, yeah, it'd probably be up to us in the future. And they're kind of nodding towards each other because it's like, well, potentially be family and stuff. And then like Xiaomi's like, what's this all about? But all that's a moot point when Yu ends up calling and says that Tien is alive. And I love that that he's awake. And I love that everyone's reactions, like the girl that's like, she's still crying even though Tien's awake. And it's like, why are you crying? It's like, I made a promise that I would stop pestering him at school if he woke up. And then Chunwa's like, I promised I would give up meat if he woke up. Now I got to be a vegetarian. And then we see the director. He's like, goodbye. And they're like, what are you doing? He's like, I promised that I would volunteer abroad if Tien woke up, so I've got to go. And they're like, oh my God, the director, he's so admirable and cool, and him flicking his hair. I was like, are you really just going to be going for the rest of the last few episodes or something? But then he trips down, not just the first flight of stairs, the entire stairs. It's like, so I guess like that kind of nipped that in the bud potentially. Maybe he still goes on his trip and eventually comes back before the end of the series. But I did love that, like, obviously the president getting the news and was like tearful and just like so happy that Tien woke up. There's kind of like the dark side of that where you're like, well, the last thing, I mean, obviously it's like you don't want any of your students to die, your precious students, but there is also the element of, yeah, but there's also the element of he's also one of only 2 male students at this school. You didn't want him to drop out. You fought tooth and nail to keep him at this school when he was willing to drop out. Of course, you wouldn't want him to drop out of life. And it's just like, I mean, Sun Hao's here, cool, but it's like, we need both of our male students here. So there's a dark side to like that fear of like something happened to Tien. I think there's less. You could read into it in that dark manner of like that's the main reason. I mean, once again, it's still the conversation. You're a student in school. We care about everyone, especially because they know Tien's circumstances, what he struggled through, why he ended up in that circumstance in the first place. It's like you were doing a good thing, like so there's that. Like I said, you could think of it in a very dark lane of like, yeah, they don't want our only other male student to die. So ultimately, they end up taking Tien home, and everyone's kind of gathered there, and it's like, right, Yanan's going to go pick up his siblings, and, it's like, right, we got to look after Tien for a while. I love the whole thing of, like, even Hao being like, actually, we didn't actually do much. It was all Fong Yu, like, looking after you the entire time while you're in the hospital. I love Tien being like, trust me, I know that you guys didn't really do much. But it's like, yeah, she handled a lot of that, and, Hao and Yannan were kind of like, oh, let's give them time together, so they have to drag Xiaomi away because she kind of refuses to read the room. But sadly, when she's off with Hao, all she's doing the entire time is talking about Tien. And it kind of flows in line with the webtoon as well. even close to the end of the series, Dao Dao still had to figure out her feelings about like Jaegu. They hadn't fully gone away until like near the end, and where she kind of was like, okay, it's kind of official. Like she kind of had to finally settle with it, and kind of by the end she does come to terms with it. I think it's like maybe the second to last chapter. I think she fully confirms it for herself, because a conversation comes up of like, you sure you don't want to bring Jaegu along? It's like, right, don't worry about it, you know. And so it parallels a little interestingly where we are in the story too, because she's bringing up Tien all the time, and Hao is like getting more and more annoyed. Like it was already annoying before, I think, especially when he started recognizing how much he liked her, because he doesn't bring up Queen in the same capacity, the same way. Like he doesn't even bring her up at all like that, because he's accepted like, yeah, they're together and moving on. But it's also now, it's like now that he realizes how he feels about Zhao Mi, it's also this thing of, especially because he's kind of going above and beyond, because he's been the one that's hung around her more than Tien has recently, and it's like all you ever do is talk about Tien. I think you also have to add in the element of, especially at the same time, you and Yanan are trying to like not fully parent trap, but still kind of like get your parents together. Like I think all that probably makes a lot of that bubble closer to the surface. So, but she's saying like, she's complaining like, right, Fong Yu's probably going to do the wrong thing. Like what if she brings up their breakup and just harms Tien more? And it's like kind of like, why haven't you moved on? Because he's like, because she's like, are you still like into Fong Yu? And he's like, no, like I kind of accepted that and moved on. He's like, unlike you, who's kind of planning duplicity. And she's like, what are you kind of implying? It's like he's implying like, oh, you're just waiting for your opportunity to strike. You haven't moved on and accepted their dating. Like even when they're breaking up, you're still looking for your opportunity. Like I said, Dao Dao previously, the moment they broke up, would have jumped at that opportunity. But the fact is that, did I say Dao Dao or have I been saying Xiaomi? I keep doing that. I'm sorry. If I've been saying Dao Dao, I apologize. I've meant to say Xiaomi. I think I've said Xiaomi, but I felt like I said Dao Dao there. That's the problem with my brain and my mouth go like at different speed limits. But it's a situation of just like I don't think she is as duplicitous as Hao was kind of making it. It's still the thing of she's still got her like tunnel vision when it comes to Tien, so it's kind of like, hey, let's you know, that's all she's still focused on, you know. And she kind of uses his siblings as an excuse. She cares about his siblings, but it's also a byproduct of getting closer to Tien. So Hao is just kind of fed up with everything and just kind of says like, fine, I won't follow you anymore, and he bounces. And she was kind of like, well, fine, go ahead, I don't need you around. And then obviously he's still taking Taekwondo classes, so he's there, and she's kind of ignoring him. But then like Yanan's like, oh, you two are on the outs. Oh well, Hao, come with me. Don't worry, I'll protect you. And she was so upset because it's like, what? You're stealing one of my members? Fine, I don't need you. And she tries to go out on her own. And she's like, right, I don't need him around me. You know, I'm fine. I can be happy on my own. And she goes and picks something up, and her and this lady are fighting over it, and she yells out, Hao, take it. And she tosses it, but Hao's not there. Because I think this is, while I was watching that scene, I was like, it's actually a really interesting thing I haven't talked about really enough, is Hao and Zhao Mi's relationship versus Dao Dao's relationship with the guy that she ultimately ends up with by the end of the series. The difference is, I mean, obviously Hao's been in the story since episode 1, so he's been in the series the entire time. But even him and Zhao Mi as a pair, they've been a team for a very long time. For a majority of the show, they've been a pair, you know, because they were their little meow like union alliance about, you know, him getting with Queen, her getting with Tian. Like they've spent the most time around each other. Obviously he spent more time around her recently because of looking after her, because he started realizing like how much he cared for her. So it's like, obviously Zhao Mi never picked up the signs of how far. I mean, it's understandable because they've just been around each other so long. She kind of took him for granted, because it's like, yeah, you've always kind of been there. You've just been even more overbearing, which is ironic considering she did the exact same thing to Tien. So she, once again, calling out Zhao Feng last episode for like, oh, like she knows that Yanan and Guanyan are dating. It's like it didn't stop you from like playing interference when Queen and Tien, you were trying to, at the very least, they were in the liking each other process, but didn't let each other know. So I guess that's the difference between like, oh, but I mean, even in the dating process, it's still kind of been like weird with you about that. So it's just an interesting thing. My point being that when I was kind of going on that whole diatribe is like that guy that Dao Dao gets close to, he pops up like I said, he's introduced for a little bit, and then it's quite a bit later on. He starts popping up more and more, probably like in the last third of the story. No, it's probably less than that. I'd probably say like maybe the last 30% of the story, maybe. I'm probably like fudging the numbers there, but then he starts popping up more and more frequently. Like I even said, like the last arc, the last big thing in the story, he's a part of too, and that's when Dao Dao gets kidnapped. So that's the difference there. Like I said, it's like even though it's like it's only shifting into a romantic thing now for like how for the past couple episodes, it's still a thing of him and Dao Dao have been a team the entire show. So it makes that progression of their arc even more interesting than the one with, I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound like one's better than the other, but it's like you get more time to explore that because they've been around each other so much more. Because like Xiaomi's still at the point where she doesn't even recognize Hao in that same department. Dao Dao kind of immediately felt attraction to the dude that she met, but then that was still at the time. She was like, no, the only person for me is Jaegu. But it becomes more and more apparent of how much she likes the dude as time went on. It took her a while. Like I said, even nearing the end of the series, she was still being like, do I still have feelings for Jaegu? You know, he was kind of like the first person she really fell like madly in love with type of thing. So, but the sad thing is, you know, Xiaomi, after she picks up the thing she had thrown, she's like, right, guess that idiot did serve some kind of purpose. And as she's walking, like some light flashes in her eyes, she thinks she sees Hao, but it was an illusion. And now it's kind of like your compatriot is gone, and it's like you're kind of all alone in this moment. You were never, you had moments, but he was always there by your side through a lot, you know. So now it's kind of like him not being there. It's almost like a phantom limb syndrome type of thing. So it's actually kind of sad, but I think this is going to like progress like Xiaomi to finally start seeing like, right, I like having Hao around. Like she has to, this is going to be the thing that probably makes her finally figure out her own feelings. Which, speaking of feelings, you have the whole situation with where the episode ends. There's another element I'm going to circle back to, but I'll talk about this here, is Hao and Yanan confront Yanan's dad. About like how he feels about Hao's mom, and he's like, do you like my mom? And it's like, holy crap. And it's like, I love they even had to switch positions on the table because Hao kind of plays the role of like, you got to impress me to start dating my mom potentially. So it ends up being the situation of, okay, so do you like my mom? Wait, you don't like my mom? It's like, he's like, and it's like, well, why do you think I like your mom? It's like, well, because Yanan can tell. And he looks at Yanan, who's like on the other side of the boxing ring, being like, kind of ignore me and just like say how you actually feel. And he's like, right, I do like your mom. It's like, well, why do you like her? So he ends up explaining the birthmark thing, and they're like, both of them are like, are you stupid? Is that really the only reason? Even I was like, is that the only reason why you like her? I mean, it's kind of the fundamental thing, sure, but you know, it's like you grew to like her for other reasons too. That was just kind of like the starting off point, which he was trying to explain. I even love there. He's like, do you think I'm so simple and childish? And they both look at each other and kind of nod like, yeah. He's like, okay, that's where it started. But it's also like your mom, there's other things I like about her. She's kind and she's sweet. It's like, you know, but it's like, yeah, like other people had the 7 birthmark thing. He's like, oh, I know. Like, he's like, my misunderstanding, because I thought the male cousin also had it as well. The way Yanan's dad talked about it in that moment, he was like, oh, like it's, yeah, most of the women on your mom's side of the family. I was like, okay, so it is like a woman, just a woman. I thought like the male cousin had it as well, because I was almost wondering, like, does Hao have it? But it's like, no, if it's just the female side of the family, specifically her side of the family, then it makes sense. I was like, okay, because I think I brought that up earlier before, wondering whether or not Hao had it or not. Like I said, it could still work. It could be a thing of, yeah, you get with someone, but once again, you're not just getting with them, you're getting with their entire family. Like, once again, like, obviously, like, that's how it works, like, in a lot of cultures anyway, but, like, I think it's even more heavily prominent in a lot of Asian cultures. So you'd have that whole support team behind you. So every woman with like the birthmark would be there to kind of take care of you and look after you, because that's what family's for, right? Just kind of, you know, expanding upon that. So it's like, but he said like, oh yeah, like I know other women in your family have that. Let me tell you how I know about that. And that's where the episode ends. But the other big part of this whole episode is Tien and Queen. They still are awkward around each other, because yes, she had made the promise that if he woke up, she could move past the whole thing. But I think it's a culmination of, I broke up with you because of this stuff. I promised, like, if you woke up, there were more secrets I would tell you, but I'm still not ready to tell you these secrets. This one in particular, I don't know if that was even on the table. Maybe there were other secrets that she's like, you don't know about. More along the lines of, oh, try to fail a test so that I could, be a part of your study group. Maybe stuff like that. Maybe those were the secrets she was referencing. Maybe some of the stuff that Tien doesn't know about, how she kind of tried to go above and beyond trying to get close to him, But there's still that thing of, she doesn't want to tell him what she believes to be the truth about his dad, because it would mean like him having to carry that burden, and she feels like it'd be too much for him to carry and it would undo all the progress he's made. And so obviously, like, they're just in an awkward spot with everything, and while cutting up some fruit, she cuts her finger. He immediately rushes over, puts her finger in his mouth, and now it's like she's feeling awkward, because it's like, right, we're kind of almost making it seem like we didn't break up, and there's just too much complicated stuff between us, and she just doesn't know what to do. And Tien says this line where he's like, it would have been easier to stay in a coma. If I had a choice, I would stay in that coma, because at the very least, that would mean that you'd stay by my side. You'd still be here, And obviously being reunited with his siblings, even that beautiful moment of when they go to sleep, he's sitting in the middle and he's holding on to both of their hands like, right, I almost left you guys alone, So there's a lot there, but he ultimately talks to Queen about, like, I want to go visit Uncle G's grave. Because I thought he recognized that was her at the beginning, but he didn't. Because that was something I was like, because she definitely didn't see him, but I thought he saw her. He saw the car pulling away, but he probably didn't put it together that was Queen visiting the grave, because he came back and he saw that there were flowers on Uncle G's grave. But he's like, yeah, I visited the grave once before, and I've got to go back. I want to tell him some stuff. So he wanted them to go together. And just when they were about to, like, lo and behold, Grandpa comes in to stick that dagger in deeper. He's like, "Oh, how's Tien? Oh, his health is good, huh? So has that changed your mind about the whole broad thing?" And she's like, the fact is, she didn't immediately answer saying like, "No, I'm still going abroad," meaning she was still like debating stuff. And he's like, "Oh, well, I'm glad to see you were able to kind of put all that stuff with Tien's father behind him. It was an accident." I'm like, you bastard. And so she's thinking about what Uncle G's wife is saying, and you're just like, oh, you just stuck the knife. You just made sure to twist the knife. It's like, Jesus, home dude, after everything, you're still pulling this. That sucks. I mean, I was hoping you turn things around, but nope. You're doubling. You're not even doubling. You're tripling, maybe even quadrupling down at this point in time. And so now for Queen, it's like, right, I'll go see Tien one last time, but it's like, she's just, I can't move on like I thought, And once again, because she's still under the impression like, Tien's father was like, did the most despicable thing. Because what she's also not accounting for is Tien told her like how much her father like drank himself to death. I mean, obviously he died in a car accident because he was drunk, but how he drowned himself in alcohol because of the guilt, But I'm sure for her, it's just like, maybe he felt a certain way beforehand. He did it like, but then maybe he felt guilty afterwards. But like, to me, like, if you were going through the trouble of beating someone up first and foremost and being okay with fighting them, you wouldn't drink yourself like to death the way he did. Once again, didn't drink himself to death, but like he wouldn't have drowned himself in the start. Because I think like because once again, she's going to believe Uncle G's widow, because it's like, why would she be motivated to lie when she has all the reason to lie, because she's been lying up until now, and she has extra motivation to lie because she got $3 million out of it. So it's gonna be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.